as the gentleman would like.
I thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania, my friend and colleague, and our history goes back a little farther than before we knew each other, and that's to Lancaster County. And I worked for a business headquartered in Lancaster County that taught me a lot of things. It taught me how to budget. It taught me how to look out for the future and plan. And it taught me how to listen. And I think that's the thing that we do best when we're representing the people that send us here to do their work. And during President Biden's interview with 60 Minutes, that marked the first on-air sit-down interview between the president and an American journalist in 7 months. It's abundantly clear why his handlers have been keeping him away from the cameras. He's completely out of touch with the American people. He can tell us stories about when he was in Scranton. That was back in the 70s. I was probably about 8 years old the last time President Biden, I was 8 years old when he came to Washington, D.C. So he can tell his stories from before I was 8 years old. But he's been here for 50 years. He ought to remember that the last time we had this kind of inflation, President Reagan was leading our great nation out of the disaster of the Carter years. And it looks like President Biden has failed to learn from that history, because those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it. Unfortunately, the president's forcing all of us to repeat that history of runaway inflation. During his interview, President Biden pushed back when pressed about inflation soaring to record highs, arguing that the month-to-month inflation rate has remained steady at 8.3% compared to a year ago. I guess we're supposed to say thank you. But thank you doesn't put gas in the car. Thank you doesn't put food on the table. And thank you doesn't make sure that families can save for their children's education. Keep in mind, this is the same president that told the American people inflation was transitory. So I don't know if he means it's going to come back worse than it is now or what he's thinking. But now he's spiking the football and taking credit for persistent inflation not getting worse. That's interesting. Not getting worse. It's almost like somebody that lights one house on fire and then takes credit for the house next door not catching on fire. Okay? I just can't understand it. The president can try and spin the narrative on inflation all he wants. But last night, Americans watched the president speak, and they got a glimpse into the future of our country if Washington Democrats remain in control. The reality is inflation is at a record high. American families are making tough decisions about their budgets. Decisions that President Biden has had to make since 1973, when he started collecting his check from the taxpayers. But the people for which he works are having to make those decisions. Hardworking Americans deserve real answers on how their government plans to reduce inflation, not just maintain historically high levels of it. Washington Democrats can't give the American people straight answers because it's their policies that have put us in economic turmoil. Republicans have a plan, and my colleagues so very well laid it out here before me. Regular order, making sure that every person's representative and every state senator has input on the legislation. The Republican Study Committee produced a budget that would balance in 7 years. Think about that. A balanced budget. That's what all the families have to do that are living through these disastrous policies of President Biden and Democrats that have caused them to lose 1 month's income. Think about that, 8.3% inflation. It's not a hard equation. I can write it on a chalkboard for the president. You take 12 and you divide it by 8 or you take 1 and divide it, or 1 divided by 12 is 8.3. So you got 1 year, there's 12 months in the year, that's 8.3. Not a hard equation. Although, they don't have a problem spending money. President Reagan used to say that you can't accuse them of spending like a drunken sailor, because at least the sailor is spending his own money. What they're spending is not their money. They're spending our children's money. They are robbing the future from our children. Talk about taxation without representation. Regular order needs to be restored. When we talk about the plan we have for balancing the budget, elimination of waste, and to stop leaving a financial disaster for the next generation, those are the issues that really matter to American people that we all come here to represent. The hardworking men and women who have worked their entire life, and those who get up and go to work every day to earn a living and support their families. I am committed to fighting for what they believe is important, not what the Democrats and the president inside this beltway thinks important. He's really policies are creating an issue with people being able to take care of their family and realize the American dream. When you look at the energy policy, when you look at the massive spending, when you look at the president standing at Independence Hall telling us that half the American people aren't good. That's not how you lead a nation. That's not how you be responsible. Quite frankly, how we be responsible is we listen, we include the people with the solutions in the discussion, and we work to make sure that America is strong and safe and our children have a bright future. That's our jobs. And I'm committed to making sure that I help all my colleagues here in Congress achieve that goal. So I thank the gentleman again, and I yield back.
I'd like to thank the gentleman for his wonderful comments. What's one of the things that's most frustrating about this is not only, as the gentleman just mentioned, the administration doesn't seem to understand the impact of their policies that have led to these rising prices and the pain that is causing for people in our districts.
Excuse me if I may jump back in. I don't think you could do this by accident. I mean, even to get things this bad, I don't know that you could do it by accident, quite frankly. I mean, it's an assault on American energy. It's an assault on American jobs. I just wonder what's going to happen when somebody has an electric vehicle and they get home from a long day's work and they're told they can't charge their vehicle and their child needs to be rushed to the doctor or the hospital. I know when my son was 3, he had an accident, and we got him to the hospital, and they life flighted him to the trauma center. And if we'd have run out of gas, he'd have died. So you know what? I think maybe they need to think about Americans and Americans' priorities, which is their family, and what it means to have the American dream. I've benefited from living the American dream. A kid as poor as I was would have been labeled as disadvantaged or at risk, and we didn't let our government label us or anyone else. We worked hard, and we realized the American dream, and I just want that to be alive and well for future generations. So I'll stop pontificating, but I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening.
Thank you to the gentleman for being here. We talked about what they've referred to as the Inflation Reduction Act. I think a better title for it is the Expensive Attempt to Distract Voters Act. We know the bill will not cut the deficit, and we know CBO has said that the bill will have...
I yield myself as much time as I may consume, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We thought the Democrats were obsessed with President Trump, but Justice Thomas is a close second. This bill is simply the latest installment of the Democrats' campaign to delegitimize and attempt to intimidate the United States Supreme Court. Started when President Trump nominated Brett Kavanaugh. That was just too much for the left to bear, and they launched a smear campaign in an attempt to derail his nomination. Then we saw Senator Schumer stand on the steps. Remember, a leader in the legislative branch stand on the steps of the Supreme Court, a separate and equal branch of government, and threaten Supreme Court justices. He said, quote, "I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you've released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these decisions." Just last month, a crazed individual attempted to assassinate Justice Kavanaugh in his home. An assassination attempt on a sitting justice of the United States Supreme Court. For months, Democrats on the Judiciary Committee have pursued this narrative that the Supreme Court is somehow illegitimate. Members of the committee, including the chairman, have introduced a bill to pack the court, to add 4 associate justices to our highest court. The committee has held hearings that can only be interpreted as an attempt to lay the groundwork for an effort to impeach Justice Thomas. And today, the Democrats bring forward a bill that is completely unnecessary. Why are the Democrats going down this path? Because, frankly, they have nothing else. We're debating this bill today because it is July of an election year, and inflation is at a level not seen in 40 years. Highest inflation rate in 41 years. The price of gas, the price of food, the price of daily necessities have skyrocketed. We are debating this bill today because illegal immigration is at unprecedented levels. Last month, Customs and Border Patrol reported that we have already surpassed the prior year's total for encounters at our southern border. And we still got 3 months left in the fiscal year. We're debating this bill today because they can't talk about the fact that our country is gripped by an epidemic of violent crime in every major urban area in this country. Every day, Americans are being assaulted, robbed, and murdered in our cities. We are here because the Democrats have no answers and desperately hope that a manufactured crisis will help them in November. The Democrats want Americans to believe that the Supreme Court at any moment could step in and overturn its opinions in Obergefell and Loving. That's simply not true. The very decision that Democrats say creates this threat explicitly denies it, explicitly disclaims it. Here's what the court said in the Dobbs decision. The Dobbs decision should not be misunderstood, mischaracterized to cast doubt on precedents that do not concern abortion. End of quote. The court condemned the idea that the Dobbs decision would lead to an overturning of other cases, stating, quote, "Perhaps this is designed to stoke unfounded fear in our decision, that our decision will imperil other rights," close quote. It is this unfounded fear that brings us here today. We are here for a charade. We are here for political messaging. Democrats can't run on their disastrous record. They can't run on any accomplishments less than 4 months before an election, and all Democrats can do is stoke unfounded fears, and so that is why we are here with this bill. I hope we can defeat it. I hope it doesn't pass. I think, as I said, is unnecessary and wrong. And Mr. Speaker, we reserve the balance of our